The security cameras caught everything. 16-year-old Callie Martinez, exhausted from her double shift at the hospital and her part-time cleaning job, collapsed onto the cold marble floor of Rowan Blackwell's corner office at 2 in the morning. What happened next would shock everyone who knew the ruthless CEO of Blackwell Industries. Instead of firing her on the spot, he did something that would change both their lives forever. A simple act of kindness that would ripple through the corridors of power and prove that sometimes the most unexpected heroes come in the smallest packages. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The 42nd floor of the Blackwell Tower pierced the Seattle skyline like a steel and glass monument to ambition. Inside the pristine corridors of Blackwell Industries, where million-dollar deals were sealed with handshakes and careers were made or destroyed with a single board meeting, Rowan Blackwell had built an empire that commanded respect and fear in equal measure. His reputation preceded him into every room, a man who could dissect a business proposal with surgical precision and deliver verdicts that would either launch dreams or shatter them completely. At 35, he had transformed his father's modest construction company into a multinational corporation worth over $3 billion. And he had done it by maintaining standards that others found impossibly vulgar. Hi! The cleaning crew that serviced the Blackwell Tower worked exclusively during the night shift, invisible phantoms who restored order to the chaos of corporate life while the city slept. They moved through the building like shadows, emptying trash bins, polishing surfaces, and ensuring that every morning brought the illusion of perfection to the workplace. Most employees never saw them, never thought about the hands that cleaned their desks, or the people who maintained the spotless environment they took for granted. To the executives and managers who populated the tower during daylight hours, the cleaning staff existed in a different dimension entirely, their presence acknowledged only when something went wrong. Callie Martinez had been part of this invisible workforce for 3 months, ever since her family's medical bills had spiraled beyond their ability to manage. At 16, she possessed the kind of quiet determination that came from watching her parents struggle to maintain dignity in the face of mounting debt and devastating illness. Her father, Miguel, had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 6 months earlier, and the aggressive treatment regimen had exhausted their savings while offering little hope for recovery. Her mother, Elena, worked double shifts as a hospital administrator, but even with insurance, the co-payments and experimental treatments that might extend Miguel's life cost more than their family could afford. The night shift at Blackwell Industries paid better than most cleaning jobs, partly because of the security clearance required to work in a building that housed sensitive corporate information, and partly because the work itself was demanding. The tower's 42 floors contained everything from executive suites to research laboratories, each requiring different cleaning protocols and attention to detail. Callie had learned to navigate the building's maze of offices and conference rooms with practiced efficiency, moving from floor to floor with a cart full of supplies and a mental checklist that grew longer each night. Her supervisor, Mrs. Chen, had taken a chance on hiring someone so young, but Callie's references from her school counselor and her previous part-time job at a local restaurant had convinced the older woman to dap her. Give her an opportunity. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and it provided the additional income that helped keep her family's head above water while they navigated the complexities of her father's treatment. Every night, Callie would finish her homework, grab a quick dinner, and then report to the tower at 10 o'clock, working until dawn before rushing home to shower and change for school. The routine had become second nature to her, but the physical and emotional toll was beginning to show. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her grades, while still acceptable, had slipped from the straight A's that had once earned her recognition from teachers and counselors. Her guidance counselor, Ms. Rodriguez, had expressed concern about her obvious exhaustion and had offered to help her apply for financial aid programs. But Callie's pride, inherited from her father, made it difficult for her to accept charity. She preferred to work for what her family needed, to contribute something tangible to their survival, rather than rely on the kindness of strangers. Rowan Blackwell's office occupied the northeast corner of the 42nd floor, a space that reflected both his success and his personality. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided a commanding view of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains, while the interior design balanced modern minimalism with carefully chosen pieces that spoke to his appreciation for craftsmanship and quality. The desk, carved from a single piece of walnut, had been custom-made by a furniture maker in North Carolina, and the leather chairs that surrounded the conference table bore the subtle patina that came from years of use by people making important decisions. The office was typically the last stop on Callie's nightly rounds, partly because it required the most attention to detail, and partly because she found the space oddly comforting. The view from the windows reminded her of the trips her family had taken to the mountains before her father's illness, when they would drive up to Hurricane Ridge and watch the sunset paint the peaks in shades of gold and crimson. During those quiet moments, standing alone in the office with her cleaning supplies, she would allow herself to imagine what it might feel like to command such a view, to have the resources to solve problems rather than simply endure them. On this particular night, a combination of factors had conspired to push Callie beyond her usual limits. Her father had experienced complications from his latest round of chemotherapy, requiring an emergency trip to the hospital that had kept the family awake for most of the previous night. Elena had been forced to leave work early to handle the crisis, which meant a reduction in her overtime pay at a time when every dollar mattered. Callie had attended her regular classes, struggled through a chemistry test for which she hadn't had time to study, and then spent 3 hours at the hospital with her father before reporting to work at the tower. The building seemed especially quiet that night, even by the standards of the graveyard shift. Most of the other cleaning crew members had finished their assigned floors and departed, leaving Callie to complete her work alone. She moved through the upper floors methodically, her body operating on autopilot while her mind wandered to the conversation she'd had with her father earlier that evening. Despite his pain and exhaustion, Miguel had tried to maintain his usual optimism, talking about the plans he wanted to make for the family once his treatment was complete. But Callie had seen the doubt in his eyes, the way he looked at her mother when he thought no one was watching, and she understood that his hope was as much for their benefit as his own. By the time she reached Rowan's office, it was nearly 2 a.m, and the combination of emotional stress and physical exhaustion had left her feeling disconnected from her surroundings. She went through the motions of cleaning, dusting the surfaces, emptying the trash, and polishing the windows, but her movements had become mechanical, lacking the usual care and attention she brought to her work. The office felt different somehow, charged with an energy she couldn't identify, and she found herself moving more slowly than usual, as if the space itself was trying to tell her something she wasn't ready to hear. The leather couch that faced the windows had always struck her as particularly inviting, a piece of furniture that seemed designed for contemplation rather than mere functionality. Its deep brown leather had been worn smooth by years of use, and the cushions had developed a subtle depression that suggested someone had spent considerable time there, perhaps reading reports or making phone calls while watching the city lights twinkle below. On this night, as Callie finished her cleaning and prepared to leave, the couch seemed to call to her with an almost magnetic pull. She told herself she would rest for just a moment, just long enough to gather the energy for the walk to the elevator and the ride down to the ground floor. Her cleaning cart was positioned by the door, ready for her departure, and she had completed all of her assigned tasks for the night. A brief rest wouldn't hurt anyone, and the office was empty, its usual occupant presumably at home with his family, unaware that a teenage girl was struggling to maintain her composure in his professional beat. Sanctuary. The moment Callie settled onto the couch, the accumulated stress and exhaustion of the past several months seemed to crash over her like a wave. The leather was softer than she had expected, and the cushions seemed to embrace her tired body with a comfort she hadn't experienced in weeks. She closed her eyes, intending to rest for just a few minutes, but the combination of physical exhaustion and emotional depletion proved too powerful to resist. Within moments, she had slipped into a deep sleep, her breathing becoming slow and regular as her body finally surrendered to its need for rest. The security cameras that monitored every corner of the building recorded her collapse, but the overnight security staff, accustomed to the routine movements of the cleaning crew, didn't notice the deviation from normal protocol. Callie lay curled on the couch, her cleaning uniform wrinkled and her hair falling across her face, looking far younger than her 16 years. In sleep, the worry lines that had begun to appear around her eyes relaxed, and for the first time in months, she looked like the child she still was, despite the adult responsibilities she had shouldered. Rowan Blackwell's insomnia had been his companion for as long as he could remember, a side effect of the driven personality that had propelled him to the top of the corporate world. On nights when sleep eluded him completely, he would often return to his office, finding solace in the familiar environment and the view that reminded him of how far he had traveled from his humble beginnings. The tower's night security was accustomed to his irregular appearances, and they had long since stopped questioning his presence during the early morning hours. On this particular night, Rowan had been awakened by a phone call from his Hong Kong office regarding a potential acquisition that required his immediate attention. Rather than conduct the conference call from his home, where he might disturb his housekeeper, he had dressed quickly and driven to the tower, arriving just after 2:30 in the morning. The elevator carried him smoothly to the 42nd floor, and he walked through the dimly lit corridors toward his office. His mind already engaged with the complex financial calculations that would determine whether the acquisition made strategic sense. The door to his office was slightly ajar, which struck him as unusual since the cleaning staff typically closed and locked each office after completing their work. He pushed the door open cautiously, his hand instinctively reaching for the light switch, but something made him pause. The office wasn't empty. Someone was sleeping on his couch, curled up in a position that suggested both exhaustion and vulnerability. For a moment, Rowan considered calling security, but something about the scene stopped him from reaching for his phone. The sleeping figure was small, definitely female, and wearing the uniform of the building's cleaning crew. Her face was turned toward the windows, and even in the dim light filtering in from the corridor, Rowan could see that she was young, far younger than he would have expected for someone working the night shift in a high-security SAO building. Her breathing was deep and regular, the kind of sleep that came from profound exhaustion, and her position on the couch suggested that she had simply collapsed there, overcome by fatigue. Rowan's first instinct was to wake her, to demand an explanation for her presence in his private office, but something held him back. Perhaps it was the way she looked so small and vulnerable, or perhaps it was a memory from his own childhood, when he had sometimes fallen asleep in his father's workshop after helping with construction projects that ran late into the night. Whatever the reason, he found himself studying the sleeping girl with curiosity rather than anger, trying to piece together the circumstances that had led to this moment. The office was cool, maintained at a temperature that was comfortable during the day, but chilly in the early morning hours when the building's heating system operated at reduced capacity. The girl's uniform was thin, designed for the physical activity of cleaning rather than for warmth, and Rowan could see that she was shivering slightly in her sleep. Without fully understanding why, he moved to the closet where he kept a spare jacket, a cashmere overcoat that he had worn to a business dinner earlier in the week. The act of covering the sleeping girl with his coat felt strangely natural, as if he were responding to an instinct that had been dormant for years. He was careful not to wake her, adjusting the coat gently around her shoulders and ensuring that she was covered from neck to feet. The dark blue cashmere contrasted sharply with her simple work uniform, but somehow, the combination didn't look incongruous. Instead, it seemed to emphasize her youth and the circumstances that had brought her to this moment of vulnerability. Once he was satisfied that the girl was warm and comfortable, Rowan retreated to his desk, but he found it impossible to concentrate on the financial reports that had brought him to the office. His attention kept drifting to the sleeping figure on his couch, and he found himself constructing theories about her presence there. She was obviously part of the cleaning crew, but she looked far too young to be working the night shift. Her uniform was clean and well-maintained, suggesting that she took pride in her work despite its humble nature. Her hands, visible where they emerged from beneath the coat, were small and showed signs of recent cleaning chemicals, confirming her role in the building's maintenance. The more Rowan observed the sleeping girl, the more questions arose in his mind. What circumstances had led someone so young to work the night shift? Why was she so exhausted that she had fallen asleep in his office? And what kind of life was she living that had brought her to this point of physical and emotional collapse? These were not the kinds of questions that typically occupied his attention, but something about the situation had awakened a curiosity that he couldn't easily dismiss. As the minutes passed, Rowan found himself abandoning any pretense of work and instead focusing entirely on the sleeping girl. Her face, relaxed in sleep, showed traces of the stress and worry that had been etched there by circumstances beyond her control. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, practical rather than stylish, and her features suggested a heritage that was probably Hispanic or Latin American. She was pretty in an understated way, with the kind of natural beauty that needed no enhancement and would probably become more striking as she matured. The conference call with Hong Kong came and went, conducted in whispered tones from his desk phone, while the girl continued to sleep undisturbed on his couch. Rowan found himself distracted during the call, his attention divided between the complex financial negotiations and the quiet presence of the sleeping stranger. The acquisition that had seemed so urgent just hours earlier now felt less important, overshadowed by the mystery of the girl who had somehow found refuge in his office. Dawn was beginning to break over Elliott Bay when the girl finally stirred, her body shifting slightly as she began the gradual transition from sleep to consciousness. Rowan watched as she slowly became aware of her surroundings, her eyes opening to focus on the unfamiliar weight of the coat that covered her. For a moment, she lay perfectly still, perhaps hoping that she was dreaming, and that she hadn't actually fallen asleep in her employer's office. But, as reality asserted itself, he saw the moment of panic that crossed her face as she realized where she was and what had happened. Callie sat up quickly, the cashmere coat sliding off her shoulders as she tried to orient herself in the early morning light. The office looked different at dawn, softer somehow, with the harsh fluorescent lighting replaced by the gentle glow of sunrise filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment, she couldn't remember how she had gotten there, or why she felt so rested despite the circumstances. Then she saw him, the man who had been sitting quietly at his desk, watching her sleep. Rowan Blackwell was younger than she had expected, though she realized she had never actually seen him in person before. His reputation preceded him throughout the building, spoken of in hushed tones by the security guards and maintenance staff, who occasionally glimpsed him during his rare appearances outside of normal business hours. But the man sitting across from her, dressed in dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, looked more approachable than the intimidating figure of her imagination. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and his eyes, which she had expected to be cold and calculating, held an expression of genuine curiosity rather than anger. "I'm sorry," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, as she struggled to find words adequate to the situation. "I didn't mean to fall asleep. I was just so tired, and I sat down for a minute, and I must have—" She trailed off, aware that any explanation she offered would sound like an excuse, and she had been raised to take responsibility for her actions rather than make excuses for them. Rowan held up a hand, a gesture that was meant to be reassuring rather than dismissive. "It's okay," he said quietly, his voice carrying a warmth that surprised both of them. "You looked like you needed the rest. I'm Rowan Blackwell, and I'm guessing you're part of the cleaning crew." His tone was conversational rather than accusatory, an invitation to explain rather than a demand for justification. Callie nodded, still clutching the cashmere coat that had kept her warm through the night. "I'm Callie Martinez. I work for the cleaning service that contracts with your building. I've been cleaning your office for about 3 months now, but I've never seen you here at night before." She paused, gathering courage for what she knew she had to say next. "I know I shouldn't have fallen asleep here. I know you probably have to fire me, and I understand that. I just want you to know that it wasn't because I don't take my job seriously. I do. I really do. I really do. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable, and Rowan found himself moved by her obvious distress. "I'm not going to fire you," he said gently. "But I am curious about what brought you to this point. You look like you should be in high school, not working the night shift in a corporate building. What's your story, Callie Martinez?" The question hung in the air between them, simple in its wording, but complex in its implications. Callie had become accustomed to keeping her family's struggles private, partly out of pride and partly out of a desire to protect her parents from the scrutiny and pity of others. But something about Rowan's manner, the way he had covered her with his coat rather than waking her immediately, the gentle tone of his voice, made her feel that he was genuinely interested in her answer rather than simply going through the motions of corporate concern. "I am in high school," she said finally. "I'm a junior at Roosevelt High School. I work here because my family needs the money. My dad is sick, and the medical bills are more than my mom can handle on her own. Even with insurance, I'm not trying to make excuses or get sympathy. I just want to work and help my family get through this." She met his eyes as she spoke, her chin lifted slightly in a gesture of defiance that suggested she was prepared for judgment, but refused to be ashamed of her circumstances. Rowan felt something shift inside him as he listened to her explanation, a recognition that he was in the presence of someone whose character had been forged by circumstances that would have defeated many people twice her caste. "Age. What kind of illness does your father have?" he asked gently, and when she hesitated, he added, "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. I'm just trying to understand." "Pancreatic cancer," Callie said, quietly. "Stage 4. The doctors say there are some experimental treatments that might help, but they're expensive, and insurance doesn't cover all of them. My mom works as a hospital administrator, and she's good at her job, but there's only so much she can do. I started working here because every little bit helps, and the night shift pays better than most jobs I could get at my age." The words hung between them, simple and devastating in their honesty. Rowan had dealt with many crises in his business career, had navigated complex negotiations and hostile takeovers, but he had never been confronted with anything as straightforward and heartbreaking as a 16-year-old girl working night shifts to help pay for her father's cancer treatment. The problems he was accustomed to solving could be addressed with money, strategy, and determination. But the situation Callie had described seemed to require something more fundamental, something that had been absent from his life for so long that he had almost forgotten it existed. "How long have you been working here?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer from what she had told him earlier. 3 months, Callie confirmed. "Mrs. Chen, my supervisor, took a chance on me even though I'm younger than most of the people who work for the cleaning service. I've been trying really hard to do a good job, to prove that she made the right decision. Last night was just, I don't know, everything kind of caught up with me at once. My dad had to go to the emergency room yesterday, and I didn't get much sleep the night before. And then I had a test at school that I wasn't prepared for because I'd been spending so much time at the hospital." She paused, realizing that she was rambling, offering details that he probably didn't want to hear. But Rowan was listening intently, his business-trained mind already beginning to analyze the situation and consider potential solutions. "What does your mother do at the hospital?" he asked. "She's an administrator in the billing department," Callie replied. "She's been there for 8 years, and she's really good at her job. She knows all the insurance regulations and how to help people navigate the system. But even with her employee benefits, there are so many things that insurance doesn't cover, especially for experimental treatments." End quote. Rowan nodded thoughtfully. The healthcare industry was one that Blackwell Industries had been considering entering, particularly in the area of medical technology and equipment. He had spent considerable time studying the complexities of healthcare administration and was familiar with the challenges that families like Callie's faced when confronted with serious illness. The irony wasn't lost on him that while he had been analyzing the healthcare industry as a potential business opportunity, he had never considered the human faces behind the statistics and market projections. "What kind of grades do you get in school?" he asked, surprising himself at the question. It wasn't the kind of information that typically interested him, but something about Callie's manner, the way she spoke and carried herself despite her obvious exhaustion, suggested that there was more to her story than just the tragic circumstances of her father's illness. Callie shifted uncomfortably, aware that her academic performance had declined since she had started working nights. "I used to get mostly A's," she admitted, "but this semester has been harder. I'm still passing everything, but I'm not doing as well as I used to. My guidance counselor says I should think about applying to college, but I don't see how that's going to be possible with everything that's going on with my family." The admission revealed more than she probably intended, painting a picture of a young woman whose potential was being limited by circumstances beyond her control. Rowan found himself thinking about the scholarships and opportunities he had received as a young man, the mentors who had recognized his potential and helped him develop it. He had been fortunate to have advocates who believed in him, and were willing to invest in his future. But Callie seemed to be navigating her challenges alone, without the support system that had made his own success possible. "Had you thought about what you'd like to study in college?" he asked. "What interests you besides helping your family?" The question seemed to catch Callie off guard, as if no one had asked her about her own dreams and aspirations in a very long time. "I've always been interested in business," she said slowly. "Not just making money, but understanding how things work, how organizations function, how to solve problems. I know that probably sounds weird coming from someone who cleans offices for a living. But I've always been curious about how decisions get made and how you can tell whether they're good decisions or not." Rowan smiled, the first genuine smile he had experienced in longer than he could remember. "That doesn't sound weird at all. In fact, it sounds like you have good instincts for business, the ability to see how organizations function and to evaluate decision-making processes is exactly what separates good managers from great ones. Have you ever thought about studying business administration or economics?" "I've thought about it," Callie admitted. "But college is expensive, and even if I could get financial aid, I don't think I could afford to stop working. My family needs the income, especially now. Maybe someday, when things are more stable, I could take some classes at the community college. But right now, I just need to focus on getting through high school and helping my parents deal with my dad's treatment." End quote. The pragmatism in her voice was heartbreaking, a reminder of how quickly childhood could be compressed when circumstances demanded adult responsibility. Rowan found himself thinking about his own teenage years, when his biggest concerns had been maintaining his grades and earning enough money from his part-time job to buy a car. He had never been forced to choose between his education and his family's survival, had never had to weigh his own dreams against immediate necessity. "Callie," he said carefully, "I'd like to ask you something, and I want you to think about it before you answer. What if there were a way for you to continue your education without sacrificing your family's financial stability? What if you could get the support you need to pursue your dreams while still helping your parents through this difficult time? Would you be interested in exploring that possibility?" Callie looked at him suspiciously, her instincts warning her to be cautious of offers that seemed too good to be true. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I don't understand what you're suggesting." Rowan leaned back in his chair, considering how to explain the thoughts that were beginning to form in his mind. "I'm not entirely sure yet," he admitted. "But I'm wondering if there might be opportunities within Blackwell Industries that could benefit both you and your family. Your mother has experience in healthcare administration, which is an area we're interested in expanding into. And you have demonstrated qualities that suggest you might have potential in business, if you were given the right opportunities to develop them." "You don't even know me," Callie protested. "You've talked to me for 20 minutes. How can you know whether I have potential or not?" "You're right," Rowan acknowledged. "I don't know you well enough to make definitive judgments about your capabilities. But I know that you're 16 years old, working night shifts to help pay for your father's medical treatment while maintaining passing grades in high school. I know that you take enough pride in your work to feel genuinely distressed about falling asleep in my office. And I know that when I asked you about your interests, you didn't talk about clothes or celebrities or social media. You talked about understanding how organizations function and how to evaluate decision-making processes. Those aren't typical concerns for someone your age." Callie was quiet for a long moment, processing what he had said. "Even if what you're saying is true," she said finally, "I still don't understand what you're offering. Are you talking about giving me a different job? Because I don't have any office skills or experience. I don't even know how to use most computer programs." "I'm talking about investment," Rowan said simply. "Investment in potential. I'm talking about creating opportunities for you to develop the skills and knowledge you'd need to succeed in business, while also making sure that your family has the financial support they need during your father's treatment. I'm talking about recognizing that talent and determination shouldn't be wasted because of unfortunate circumstances." The offer was unprecedented in Rowan's experience. He had never been moved to make such a gesture before, had never felt compelled to intervene in someone else's life in such a direct and personal way. His charitable giving, while substantial, had always been conducted at arm's length, through foundations and organizations that handled the details of distribution. But something about Callie's situation, the combination of her obvious intelligence and determination with the heartbreaking circumstances that were limiting her opportunities, had awakened a desire to help that felt both foreign and urgent. "I don't know what to say," Callie admitted. "Part of me wants to believe that this is real, that someone would actually want to help me and my family. But another part of me is scared that I'm misunderstanding something, that there's a catch I'm not seeing." "There's no catch," Rowan assured her. "At least, not in the way you're probably thinking. I'm not looking for anything from you except the chance to see what you can achieve if you're given the right opportunities. I'm successful enough that I can afford to make investments in people I believe in. And I'm old enough to understand that money is only valuable if it's used for something meaningful." End quote. Callie studied his face, searching for signs of deception or hidden motives. But his expression remained open and sincere, and she found herself beginning to believe that his offer might be genuine. "What would this investment look like?" she asked cautiously. "What would you expect from me?" "I'm still working out the details," Rowan admitted, "but I'm thinking about a few different possibilities. For your mother, I'd like to explore whether there might be a position for her within Blackwell Industries that would utilize her healthcare administration experience while providing better compensation and benefits. For you, I'm thinking about educational opportunities that would allow you to develop your business skills while still having time for your regular schoolwork." End quote. "What kind of educational opportunities?" Callie asked, her curiosity overcoming her caution. "There are several private schools in the Seattle area that offer exceptional business programs for motivated students," Rowan explained. "Some of them have partnerships with local colleges that allow high school students to earn college credit while completing their secondary education. Others have internship programs that provide real-world business experience. I'm thinking about opportunities that would challenge you academically, while also giving you practical experience in the kind of work that interests you." The scope of what he was suggesting was almost overwhelming. Callie had never imagined that such opportunities might be available to someone in her circumstances, had never dared to dream about attending private school or earning college credit while still in high school. "Those kinds of schools must be expensive," she said. "I couldn't afford the tuition." "That's where the investment part comes in," Rowan said gently. "I'm talking about covering the costs of your education in exchange for your commitment to making the most of the opportunities you'd be given. I'm talking about believing in your potential enough to bet on your success." Callie felt tears welling up in her eyes, overwhelmed by the generosity of his offer and the possibility that her family's struggles might actually have a solution. But years of disappointment had taught her to be skeptical of offers that seemed too good to be true. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "Why would you care what happens to me and my family?" It was a fair question, and one that Rowan had been asking himself since the moment he had covered her with his coat. "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted. "Maybe it's because I've been successful enough to recognize that success without purpose is ultimately meaningless. Maybe it's because I see something in you that reminds me of myself at your age, before I had the opportunities that shaped my life. Or maybe it's simply because I believe that people like you shouldn't have to choose between their dreams and their family's survival." The honesty in his voice was unmistakable, and Callie found herself beginning to trust that his motives were genuine. "If I said yes," she said slowly, "what would happen next? How would this work?" "The first step would be to have a conversation with your parents," Rowan said. "I'd want to meet them, to understand their situation better, and to make sure they're comfortable with the arrangements I'm proposing. Then we'd start exploring specific opportunities, both for your mother's career and for your education. We'd take it step by step, making sure that each decision is one that works for your family." End quote. Callie nodded, though she was still struggling to process the magnitude of what was being offered. "I'd have to talk to my parents before I could make any decisions," she said. "They'd need to understand what you're proposing and decide whether they think it's a good idea." "Of course," Rowan agreed. "In fact, I'd prefer to have that conversation with all of you together. Would it be possible for me to meet with your family sometime in the next few days? I could come to your home, or we could meet here at the office, whatever would be most comfortable for your parents." The idea of Rowan Blackwell coming to her family's modest apartment was both thrilling and terrifying. Callie tried to imagine introducing her parents to the man who owned the building where she worked, explaining to them that he wanted to invest in her future and help solve their financial problems. It seemed like something from a movie, too dramatic and unlikely to be real. But the man sitting across from her was real, and his offer, however unprecedented, appeared to be genuine. "I think they'd be more comfortable meeting here," she said finally. "My dad is doing better now, but he gets tired easily, and it might be easier for him to come to the office than to have you come to our apartment." She paused, then added, "Plus, I think they'd be more likely to believe this is really happening if they see where you work, if they understand who you are." Rowan smiled at her practical approach to the situation. "That makes sense. Would this evening work? I could arrange to meet with your family after your mother gets off work, and we could discuss the possibilities I have in mind." "I'll have to check with them first," Callie said, though she was already imagining the conversation she would have with her parents when she got home. "How did you tell your family that a millionaire wanted to invest in your future? How did you explain that their financial problems might have a solution that seemed too good to be true?" "Of course," Rowan said. "Take all the time you need to discuss it with them. But Callie, I want you to know that I'm serious about this offer. I'm not making promises I can't keep. And I'm not going to change my mind. If you and your family are interested in exploring these possibilities, I'm committed to making them work." Callie stood up, still clutching his cashmere coat, and for the first time in months, she felt something that might have been hope. "I should get going," she said. "I need to get home and get ready for school, and I want to talk to my parents before they go to work." "Keep the coat," Rowan said when she started to hand it back to him. "It's going to be cold outside, and you've got a long day ahead of you." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a business card, writing his personal cell phone number on the back. "Call me when you've had a chance to talk to your parents. We'll set up a time to meet that works for everyone." Callie took the card and the coat, still feeling as if she were moving through a dream. "Thank you," she said simply. "I don't know what else to say except thank you." "You don't have to say anything else," Rowan replied. "Just promise me you'll think about what we've discussed and give your family a chance to consider the possibilities." Callie nodded, wrapping the cashmere coat around her shoulders as she prepared to leave. The fabric was softer than anything she had ever worn, and its warmth seemed to represent more than just physical comfort. It felt like the first tangible sign that her family's circumstances might actually change for Ball. The better. The elevator ride down to the ground floor gave her time to process what had just happened. But even after 42 floors of contemplation, the encounter still felt surreal. She had entered Rowan Blackwell's office as an exhausted teenager who had made a potentially career-ending mistake, and she was leaving as someone who had been offered opportunities she had never dared to imagine. The transformation seemed too dramatic to be real, but the weight of his business card in her pocket and the warmth of his coat around her shoulders provided concrete evidence that the conversation had actually taken place. The morning air was crisp as she stepped out of the Blackwell Tower, and the city was beginning to come alive with the early rush of commuters and delivery trucks. Callie walked to the bus stop with a lightness in her step that had been absent for months, her mind racing with possibilities and questions in equal measure. How would she explain what had happened to her parents? How would they react to the news that a stranger wanted to invest in their daughter's future? And most importantly, was it possible that their long nightmare of financial struggle and medical uncertainty might actually have an end in sight? The bus ride home took her through neighborhoods that reflected the economic diversity of Seattle, from the gleaming towers of the downtown business district to the modest residential areas where working families like hers struggled to make ends meet. As she watched the city pass by her window, Callie found herself seeing it differently than she had just hours before. The same streets and buildings that had once seemed to represent barriers and limitations now looked like territories to be explored, opportunities to be seized. Her family's apartment was located in a complex that had seen better days, but was maintained with the kind of careful attention that spoke to residents who took pride in their homes, despite their modest circumstances. The building was quiet at this early hour, most of its occupants either still sleeping or just beginning their morning routines. Callie climbed the stairs to the third floor, her key ready before she reached the door, aware that her parents would be preparing for work and might be surprised by her early return. Elena Martinez was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when Callie entered the apartment, her movements efficient and practiced as she managed the morning routine that had become second nature over the years. She looked up in surprise when her daughter appeared in the doorway, still wearing the expensive coat that was obviously not part of her usual work uniform. "You're home early," Elena observed, taking in Callie's appearance with the kind of maternal scrutiny that could detect subtle changes in mood and circumstance. "And where did you get that coat? It looks expensive." Callie took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would either sound like the beginning of a fairy tale or the rambling of an overtired teenager. "Mom, I need to tell you about something that happened at work tonight. Something incredible and strange and maybe impossible, but I think it might be real." Elena turned off the stove and gave her daughter her full attention, recognizing the tone of voice that Callie used when she had something important to communicate. "What happened, mija? Are you in some kind of trouble?" "No, not trouble," Callie said quickly. "At least, I don't think so. But I fell asleep in one of the offices I was cleaning, and the owner of the company found me there, and instead of firing me, he wants to help us. He wants to help our family." Elena's expression shifted from concern to skepticism as she processed what her daughter was telling her. "Slow down," she said gently. "Start from the beginning and tell me exactly what happened." Callie settled into one of the kitchen chairs, pulling the cashmere coat more tightly around her shoulders as she began to recount the events of the night. She described her exhaustion, her collapse on Rowan's couch, and her panic upon waking to find him watching her sleep. She explained how he had covered her with his coat instead of calling security, how he had asked about her family's circumstances, and how he had responded to her explanation with an offer that seemed too generous to be believed. As Callie spoke, Elena's expression moved through a range of emotions, from disbelief to hope to caution. She had heard too many stories of people who preyed on families in desperate circumstances, offering help that came with strings attached or conditions that ultimately made their situations worse. But she also recognized the sincerity in her daughter's voice and the tangible evidence of kindness in the expensive coat that had been given without expectation of return. "This man, this Rowan Blackwell," Elena said when Callie had finished her account, "what exactly did he offer to do for our family?" "He wants to meet with you and Dad to discuss it," Callie explained. "But he mentioned finding a better job for you, something in healthcare administration that would pay more and have better benefits. And for me, he talked about private schools with business programs, maybe even opportunities to earn college credit while I'm still in high school." Elena was quiet for a long moment, her practical mind analyzing the offer for potential problems and hidden costs. "Mija, you know that people don't usually offer to help strangers without wanting something in return. What does he expect from you in exchange for this help?" "He said he doesn't expect anything except for me to make the most of the opportunities," Callie replied. "He called it an investment in potential. He said he's successful enough that he can afford to help people he believes in." "And you believe him?" Elena asked. "You think his motives are genuine?" Callie considered the question seriously, remembering the expression on Rowan's face when he had asked about her dreams and aspirations, the way he had listened to her answers as if they mattered. "I think so," she said finally. "I know it sounds crazy, and I know we should be careful. But Mom, he covered me with his coat when he could have just woken me up and fired me. He asked about Dad's illness, like he really cared about the answer. Then when he talked about helping us, it felt real. It felt like he meant it." Elena nodded slowly, her maternal instincts telling her that her daughter was being truthful about her impressions, even if the situation itself seemed almost too good to be true. "What did you tell him about meeting with us?" "I told him I'd have to talk to you and Dad first," Callie said. "He gave me his business card with his personal phone number and said to call him when we decided whether we wanted to meet. He offered to come here, or to have us meet him at his office. Whatever would be more comfortable." Elena looked at the business card that Callie handed her, noting the elegant design and the weight of the paper stock. Everything about it suggested legitimacy and success, but she knew that appearances could be deceiving. "We'll need to discuss this with your father," she said. "This is the kind of decision that affects the whole family." Miguel Martinez was awake when they entered the bedroom, propped up against pillows and looking pale but alert. The latest round of chemotherapy had left him weakened, but his mind remained sharp, and he had learned to conserve his energy for the conversations and decisions that mattered most. He listened intently as Callie repeated her story for his benefit, his dark eyes focusing on her face as she described the night's events. When she had finished, Miguel was quiet for several minutes, his expression thoughtful as he considered what he had heard. "This man, he knows you're 16? He asked finally. "Yes," Callie confirmed. "I told him I was a junior in high school, and he didn't seem surprised. He asked about my grades and what I wanted to study in college." Miguel nodded slowly. "And he didn't ask for anything inappropriate? He didn't make you uncomfortable in any way?" "No, Dad," Callie said firmly. "He was respectful the whole time. Professional. He asked about my interests and our family situation, but he never said or did anything that made me feel unsafe." Miguel exchanged glances with his wife, a wordless communication that came from years of marriage and shared decision-making. "Elena, what do you think? Does this sound legitimate to you?" "I don't know," Elena admitted. "Part of me wants to believe that there are still people in the world who help others without expecting anything in return. But another part of me is scared that this is too good to be true, that there's something we're not seeing." "There's only one way to find out," Miguel said quietly. "We meet with him. We listen to what he has to say, we ask the hard questions, and we trust our instincts. If his offer is genuine, and if it can help our family get through this difficult time, then we'd be foolish not to consider it. If there are strings attached or hidden conditions, we'll figure that out and walk away." Callie felt a surge of relief at her father's practical approach to the situation. Miguel had always been the family's voice of reason, the one who could analyze complex situations and find the path forward. If he thought the meeting was worth having, then perhaps Rowan's offer deserved serious consideration. "When should we meet with him?" Elena asked. "I can probably get off work early one day this week if we need to." "He said he was flexible about the timing," Callie replied. "He wanted to work around your schedule. I think he understands that Dad gets tired easily and that you have work commitments." Miguel smiled at his daughter's diplomatic explanation of his limitations. "Call him today," he said. "Set up a meeting for this evening if possible. I'd rather deal with this quickly than spend days wondering whether it's real." Callie nodded and reached for her phone, then hesitated. What if he's changed his mind? What if he's had time to think about it and decided that helping us isn't worth the trouble? "Then we'll be no worse off than we were yesterday," Miguel said gently. "But if he hasn't changed his mind, if his offer is genuine, then this could be the break our family has been praying for." Callie dialed the number on the back of Rowan's business card, her heart racing as she waited for him to answer. When his voice came through the phone, warm and professional, she felt a mixture of relief and renewed nervousness. "Mr. Blackwell, this is Callie Martinez. I've talked to my parents, and we'd like to meet with you to discuss the possibilities you mentioned. Would this evening be convenient for you?" "This evening would be perfect," Rowan replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Would 6 o'clock work for your family? That should give your mother time to get off work, and give all of you time to prepare for the conversation." 6 o'clock sounds good," Callie confirmed. "Should we come to your office?" "Actually, I'd like to suggest something different," Rowan said. "There's a conference room on the 3rd or 5th floor that's more comfortable for family meetings, less formal than my office. It has a view of the city, and there's space for all of us to sit and talk comfortably. Would that work?" "That sounds perfect," Callie said. "We'll see you at 6. After ending the call, she turned to her parents with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "He wants to meet at 6 tonight. He seemed happy that we called, like he was hoping we would." Elena began mentally reorganizing her day, calculating what she would need to do to leave work early and prepare for a meeting that could potentially change their family's future. "I'll call my supervisor and explain that I have a family emergency," she said. "It's not exactly a lie, considering what we're dealing with." Miguel struggled to sit up straighter, his body protesting the effort, but his determination overriding his physical limitations. "I want to look presentable for this meeting," he said. "If this man is serious about helping us, I want him to see that we're a family worth investing in." The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation and nervous anticipation. Elena left work early and spent time researching Blackwell Industries online, trying to learn as much as she could about the company and its CEO. What she found was impressive. A track record of business success and corporate responsibility that suggested Rowan Blackwell was exactly who he appeared to be. Miguel rested during the afternoon, conserving his energy for the evening meeting, while Callie tried unsuccessfully to concentrate on her homework. By 5:30, the Martinez family was dressed in their best clothes and ready to leave for the Blackwell Tower. Miguel wore a suit that had been purchased for job interviews years earlier but was still well-maintained and professional-looking. Elena had chosen a conservative dress that reflected her position as a hospital administrator, and Callie wore a simple skirt and blouse that made her look older and more mature than her 16 years. The elevator ride to the 35th floor seemed to take forever, each family member lost in their own thoughts about what the next hour might bring. When the doors opened, they were greeted by Rowan himself, dressed casually but expensively in dark slacks and a button-down shirt. His smile was warm and welcoming, and his demeanor immediately put them at ease. "Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, I'm Rowan Blackwell. Thank you for coming tonight. I know this situation must seem unusual, but I'm hoping our conversation will help clarify what I'm proposing and whether it might be beneficial for your family." Miguel stepped forward and extended his hand, his grip firm despite his illness. "Thank you for your interest in helping our family, Mr. Blackwell. I have to admit, this is not something we were expecting." "I understand your caution," Rowan replied as he led them into the conference room. "What I'm proposing is unconventional, and you're right to ask questions and make sure you understand what's being offered." The conference room was elegantly appointed but comfortable, with a large table surrounded by leather chairs and floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a spectacular view of the Seattle skyline. Rowan had arranged for coffee and light refreshments, small touches that demonstrated his consideration for their comfort. Once they were seated, Rowan began by explaining his encounter with Callie the previous night, his impressions of her character and potential, and his growing conviction that her family deserved support during their time of crisis. He spoke directly and honestly about his motivations, acknowledging that his offer was unprecedented in his experience, but explaining why he felt compelled to make it. "I've been successful in business," he said, "but success without purpose is ultimately hollow. When I met Callie and learned about your family's situation, I realized that I had an opportunity to use my resources in a way that could make a real difference in people's lives. I'm not talking about charity, because charity implies a one-way transaction. I'm talking about investment, about recognizing potential and providing the support necessary to help it flourish." Elena leaned forward, her administrative background evident in the directness of her questions. "What specifically are you proposing, Mr. Blackwell? What would this investment look like in practical terms?" Rowan opened a folder that contained several documents he had prepared during the day. "I've identified several possibilities that I think could benefit your family. For you, Mrs. Martinez, I'd like to offer a position within Blackwell Industries as Director of Healthcare Administration. The position would involve overseeing our expansion into medical technology and equipment, utilizing your experience in hospital administration to help us understand the needs of healthcare providers." Elena's eyes widened as she processed what he was saying. What kind of salary would such a position offer? The starting salary would be $120,000 annually, with full benefits including comprehensive health insurance that would cover experimental treatments not typically covered by standard DALF policies. The number hung in the air, representing more than double Elena's current income and the kind of health benefits that could transform their approach to Miguel's Taya treatment. She struggled to maintain her composure as she realized that the salary alone would solve most of their immediate financial problems. "For Callie," Rowan continued, "I'd like to propose enrollment at Seattle Preparatory Academy, one of the finest private schools in the region. They have an exceptional business program and partnerships with several universities that would allow her to earn college credit while completing her high school education. The tuition and associated costs would be covered entirely, and she would also receive a monthly stipend to compensate for the income she currently earns from the cleaning job." Callie felt tears welling up in her eyes as she realized that the opportunities she had dreamed about but never dared to pursue were being offered to her as concrete possibilities. "Why would you do this for us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I believe that talent and determination shouldn't be wasted due to unfortunate circumstances," Rowan replied. "Because I think you have the potential to accomplish great things if you're given the right opportunities. And because I've learned that the most meaningful success comes from helping others achieve their dreams." Miguel had been listening intently to the conversation, his businessman's instincts analyzing the offer for potential problems or hidden conditions. "This is incredibly generous, Mr. Blackwell, but I have to ask, what do you expect from our family in return? What are the conditions of this investment?" "The only condition is that Callie commit to making the most of her educational opportunities," Rowan said. "I'd like her to maintain good grades, participate actively in her business courses, and keep me informed about her progress and interests. As she develops her skills and knowledge, there may be opportunities for internships within Blackwell Industries, but those would be based on her merit and interest, not on any obligation." "And if she decides that business isn't for her?" Elena asked. "If she discovers other interests or wants to pursue a different career path, then she should follow her passions," Rowan said without hesitation. "The point of education is to help young people discover their strengths and interests, not to lock them into predetermined paths. If Callie decides to become a doctor or a teacher or an artist, I'll support that decision as long as she's pursuing it with dedication and purpose." Miguel exchanged glances with his wife and daughter, seeing in their faces the same mixture of hope and disbelief that he was experiencing. "Mr. Blackwell, your offer is beyond anything we could have imagined. But I have to ask, from a practical standpoint, how do we know that you're serious? How do we know that this isn't some kind of elaborate joke or misunderstanding?" Rowan reached into his briefcase and withdrew several official-looking documents. "These are employment contracts for Elena's position, enrollment agreements with Seattle Preparatory Academy, and financial arrangements for Callie's educational expenses. Everything is legitimate and legally binding. I had my lawyers prepare the documents this afternoon." Eleanor reached for the employment contract with trembling hands, scanning the terms and conditions with the trained eye of someone who had spent years dealing with legal and financial documents. Everything appeared to be exactly as Rowan had described, with no hidden clauses or unreasonable conditions. "The health insurance provisions," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "They really would cover Miguel's experimental treatments?" "They would cover any treatment recommended by his oncologist," Rowan confirmed. "Cost would not be a factor in treatment decisions." Miguel felt tears streaming down his face as he realized that the experimental treatments his doctors had mentioned but dismissed as financially unfeasible might actually become available to him. The possibility of costs, extending his life, of having more time with his family, suddenly seemed real rather than wishful thinking. "There's one more thing," Rowan said gently. "I know that Miguel's treatment has been limited by financial considerations, and I'd like to arrange for him to be evaluated by the oncology team at Seattle Children's Hospital, which has one of the most advanced cancer treatment programs in the country. The evaluation and any recommended treatments would be covered entirely." The room was quiet except for the sound of Elena's quiet sobs as she struggled to process the magnitude of what was being offered to her family. Callie reached across the table to take her mother's hand, her own eyes filled with tears of gratitude and overwhelming relief. "Why us?" Miguel asked again, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Out of all the families who are struggling, why did you choose to help us?" Rowan was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer a question that he wasn't entirely sure he understood himself. "I think sometimes life puts people in our path for reasons we don't fully comprehend," he said finally. "Maybe it was chance that brought Callie to my office last night, or maybe it was something more purposeful. What I know is that meeting your daughter reminded me that success means nothing if it's not used to make the world a better place. Helping your family feels like the right thing to do, and in my experience, when something feels right at this deep a level, it usually is." Elena looked up from the contract she had been studying, her face streaked with tears, but her expression determined. "If we accept your offer, Mr. Blackwell, I want you to know that we won't disappoint you." Elena and I will work harder than we've ever worked to justify your faith in us." "I have no doubt about that," Rowan replied. "I've seen enough of your family's character to know that you don't give up easily and that you don't take opportunities for granted." Callie found her voice at last, though it was trembling with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "I don't know how anyone could ever repay this kind of generosity." "You don't repay it," Rowan said gently. "You pay it forward. Someday, when you're successful and established in your career, you help someone else who's facing the kind of challenges your family is dealing with now." That's how generosity works. It creates a cycle of opportunity and support that extends far beyond the original gesture. Miguel struggled to his feet, his body weak, but his spirit strengthened by hope. "Mr. Blackwell, on behalf of my family, I accept your offer. We'll sign whatever documents need to be signed, and we'll prove that your investment in us was a wise decision." The next hour was spent reviewing contracts and agreements, answering questions about logistics and timing, and beginning to plan the practical steps that would transform the Martinez family's circumstances. Elena would start her new position at Blackwell Industries within 2 weeks, and Callie would begin classes at Seattle Preparatory Academy at the start of the next semester. Miguel's evaluation at the cancer center was scheduled for the following week, with the possibility of beginning new treatments shortly thereafter. As the meeting concluded and the Martinez family prepared to leave, Rowan felt a satisfaction that was deeper and more meaningful than any business success he had ever achieved. The contracts and agreements were important, but what mattered most was the transformation he had witnessed in the faces of 3 people who had entered his conference room, burdened by circumstances beyond their control, and were leaving with hope for a future they had never dared to imagine. Callie lingered for a moment after her parents had left the conference room, still struggling to believe that the night's events were real. "Mr. Blackwell," she said quietly, "I promise you won't regret this. I'll work harder than I've ever worked to make the most of these opportunities." "I know you will," Rowan replied. "But Callie, I want you to remember something important. You didn't earn this opportunity because you're perfect or because you've never made mistakes. You earned it because you showed courage and determination in the face of impossible circumstances. Don't let the pressure to be perfect overshadow the joy of learning and growing." End quote. 6 months later, Callie Martinez stood at the podium in the auditorium of Seattle Preparatory Academy, delivering the valedictory address to her graduating class. Her father, Miguel, sat in the front row beside her mother, his face healthier and more vibrant than it had been in over a year. The experimental treatments covered by Elena's enhanced health insurance had not cured his cancer, but they had significantly extended his prognosis and improved his quality of life. Elena, elegant in a new dress that reflected her elevated position at Blackwell Industries, beamed with pride as her daughter spoke about the importance of recognizing opportunity and the responsibility that came with privilege. In the back of the auditorium, Rowan Blackwell listened to Callie's speech with quiet satisfaction, knowing that his investment had yielded returns that could not be measured in financial terms. The young woman at the podium bore little resemblance to the exhausted teenager who had fallen asleep on his office couch. She spoke with confidence and eloquence about her plans to study business administration at the University of Washington while continuing to work part-time at Blackwell Industries, gaining practical experience that would complement her academic learning. As Callie concluded her speech and the audience erupted in applause, Rowan reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them all to this moment. A simple act of kindness, covering a sleeping girl with his coat instead of waking her immediately, had led to transformations that none of them could have anticipated. The Martinez family had not only survived their crisis, but had emerged stronger and more united, with opportunities and resources that would benefit not only them, but the community they would inevitably serve as they pursued their dreams. The story of the little maid who fell asleep in the CEO's office had become legend within the walls of Blackwell Industries, told and retold as an example of how unexpected encounters could change lives in ways that extended far beyond the original gesture. But for Rowan, Callie, and the Martinez family, it was not a story but a beginning, the first chapter in a much larger narrative about the power of compassion, the importance of recognizing potential in unexpected places, and the profound satisfaction that came from using success to create opportunities for others. Years later, when Callie had established her own successful business and was mentoring young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, she would often think back to that night when exhaustion had overcome her in a corner office, high above the Seattle skyline. She would remember the kindness of a stranger who had seen potential where others might have seen only problems. And she would understand that the most important lesson she had learned was not about business strategy or financial management, but about the responsibility that came with the ability to help others achieve their dreams. The cashmere coat that had covered her that night still hung in her closet, a tangible reminder of the moment when her life had changed direction, and the commitment she had made to ensure that her success would create opportunities for others to experience similar transformations. The cycle of generosity that Rowan had described in that conference room had indeed continued, rippling outward through the lives of everyone it touched, proving that sometimes the most unexpected encounters could lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. When a little maid fell asleep in a Millionaire CEO's office, she had unknowingly triggered a chain of events that would not only save her family, but would inspire a new understanding of what it meant to use wealth and, quote, influence for the greater good. In the end, the story was not about the dramatic gesture of a powerful man helping a struggling family, but about the recognition that every person possessed dignity and potential that deserved to be nurtured and supported, regardless of their circumstances.